If you played that every night, pretty soon, I guess, you'd probably learn it so well that we could, you know, be talking to somebody else. But I can't do that. I have, if this is on, if I'm playing in that or anything like it, I'm not a very good piano player. That's another problem. But I have to concentrate. There is no room for anything else. No room at all. What about this? This is the 31st of December 2011 in the city of Cambridge, United Kingdom, where I live, just near Sainsbury's supermarket. Driving. Can you drive and do something else? Sure? Yes, I think so. You can drive and listen to the radio. You can drive and have a nice conversation with someone. You can drive and someone's talking about driving and putting on their makeup at the same time. I haven't tried that yet. Well, I'm not going to tell you about it anyway. So you can drive and do other things, but driving is a really interesting case because the other day I was driving one of my daughters and we were going to see someone and we were driving along and this is a terribly humiliating story, but we were driving along and she started asking me a little bit about my work, you know? And then about, you know, so when you did your masters, what did you do? So for some extraordinary reason, the first time for years, I started explaining the whole idea of transformational generative grammar to my daughter. And the really sad part about this is I got incredibly enthusiastic and I was going, you know, and the only thing that stopped me was my daughter saying, "Dad, aren't we supposed to turn left here?" And if you talk to people about driving, that's what happens. You can do two things at the same time, drive and do something else. Unless the something else takes up so much space in your brain that then you get totally compromised. A friend of mine says she can never have a row with her husband if she's driving, because the row takes up so much space in her brain that suddenly your driving goes to hell and you crash. Well, provided that it's your husband, it's fine. Anyway, now, you will remember that just before Christmas, Christmas in my calendar, but just before the end of the year, BlackBerry phones went out. Nobody could use their BlackBerries. Who's got a BlackBerry? Anybody?
No.
Do you remember that? About 3 or 4 days when there was no BlackBerry at all. And I don't know, I read this in the newspaper, so it must be true, and Christine can help me, but it was reported in the newspaper that during those 3 days, traffic accidents in the United Arab Emirates fell by 40%. Because for the first time for years, people weren't driving along and texting on their BlackBerries at the same time. So, in other words, what seems to be happening is we can indeed do 2 or 3 or 4 things at the same time. However, each thing we do, as Sherry Turtle seems to suggest, is degraded by the inclusion of something else. Whether we do them at the same time or not is also open to question. What was being suggested by the guy in that interview was that you don't actually do 2 things at the same time. You do one thing, then another, backwards and forwards, task. It's about task shifting. And I'm not just telling you this for fun, because what we will come on to and what the rest of this talk will be about in a minute is obviously what that means for students and teaching and learning. Can students multitask or task shift? How many things at the same time should we ask students to do? Multitasking sounds like a late 20th century invention or an early 21st century invention. But of course it's nothing of the kind, except that the term, and I don't know etymologically speaking where multitasking came from, but I'm not quite sure when it appeared, but it's a fairly modern sort of concept. Actually, this guy, anyone know who he is? It's a man called William James. And in 1890, he wrote a book called you can't really see it, but it was called Principles of Psychology. Principles of Psychology. And in that, he wrote the following. So really all we're talking about is what you can give your attention to and how much of your attention you can give. Now, a sort of summary of those pictures I showed you is the fact that in most situations in life, we don't only do one thing at the same time, like play the notes in the music. Most of the time it's more complex than that. We do one thing, but there are lots of other things going on as well, of which we are conscious. Lots of different things fighting for our attention. But in order to be successful, we have to, I like this expression, we have to withdraw our attention from some of those things in order to be able to give it to this thing. That if I try to give my attention to 5 different things, it's not really going to work. But if, on the contrary, I foreground my attention to thing number 1 and put things 2, 3, 4, 5 in the background, I've got a chance that number 1 will be successful. It's all a question of what we prioritize and what we focus on. And if we try and focus on too many things, then our attention is what's it? Well, she uses the word degraded, dissipated, just generally screwed up. This is, I was fascinated when I was thinking about this by the conversation in this regard that goes on about CLIL. CLIL, as you know, stands for Content and Language Integrated Learning. Very quickly, because it's a title for a different session, but very quickly, CLIL does not mean English medium instruction. That is something completely different. It doesn't mean bilingual education. The people who promote and are passionately keen on CLIL say that it is different because the point of CLIL is that you teach content, maybe geography, and you teach with the content, the language you need to talk about geography. So that you're actually teaching the language at the same time as the content. In other words, you're not just saying, this is a geography lesson, boys and girls, and I'm going to talk in English. No, that's not it. You're actually teaching the language of geography as you teach geography. So if your topic is photosynthesis, you teach the kids something about photosynthesis, and you teach the language you need, however advanced or technical or complicated, you teach the language you need to talk about photosynthesis. CLIL methodologists talk about the 4 C's, and they suggest that the 4 C's of CLIL are content, which is king, which is paramount, because it's the content we're teaching, and the English to go with it, not the other way around. They say that one of the important things about CLIL is teaching the ability to communicate the content. They say that a really key feature of CLIL teaching is cognition, that is, teaching students to think about the content and learn how to think and how to study. And finally, a key component of CLIL is culture. What a lovely talk she gave, Maggie, there about culture just now. Really good. But a key feature is culture, that if you're going to talk and study content, then the culture of that content and how it affects your culture internally, externally, to and between, and etc. is really, really important. Now, the only reason I'm telling you about this is what the CLIL people say about planning and testing. What they say is, you can't test all of these things together because there's too much going on. And when you're planning a lesson, you need to plan which of these 4 C's you're going to focus on most ferociously. That's not the word I want, but you know what I mean. In other words, you don't just throw everything at people. You have to say, if I'm testing the content, then I'm probably going to not test too much cognition because the students can't take it. They can't deal with too many things at the same time. In other words, they seem to be saying exactly what William James says, which is, students cannot give their attention to everything. They have to withdraw their attention from some of the things in order to do some of the other things. And it would be unfair, and this is the point, it would be unfair to expect students to be equally good at all of the 4 things at the same time, because they don't have enough space. This is a comment from a book by Keith Johnson called Introducing Foreign Language Teaching, quoted by Graham Hall in an extremely good book called Exploring English Language Teaching, published by Routledge at the end of last year. And this quote sort of sums up what we're talking about. Basically, what the suggestion is that learners have a finite channel capacity, or room in the mind. Crick! 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 Thank you very much. Learners have a finite channel capacity, or room in the mind. And you can't overload the number of channels, because if they run out of room, space, they're screwed. It's going to mess everything up. So presumably the job of the teacher is to decide how much room to occupy at any given time. Except here's a caveat. I can tell you, students, to focus on what I want you to focus on. It doesn't mean that you will focus on that thing. You might focus on something else entirely. Students presumably make their own decisions, conscious and subconscious, about what to give their focus to. But the job of the teacher, presumably, is to try and direct that focus so that we make sure that the appropriate amount of room in their mind is focused on the right thing. Crick! Crick! Now the reason I keep going crick, crack like that is because of this woman. This is a woman called Jan Blake. And Jan Blake, basically, if you Google Jan Blake storyteller, you will come across one of the most amazing women I have ever met, who I'm proud to call a friend. She is a professional storyteller. And all she does is she sits there or stands there and tells stories. No technology, no nothing. She just stands and tells stories. She's done it all over the world. She's also done it, she did it 2 years ago as the final plenary of the IATEFL conference. Now IATEFL is my local Teachers Association, International Association of Teachers of English as a Foreign Language. She did it, she told stories in the final plenary, and as on every occasion when I've seen her tell stories, the moment she finished, the 100% of the audience rose to their feet and cheered. Because she is just absolutely brilliant. I've seen her tell, I saw her do storytelling to 4,000 teenagers. And you could have heard a pin drop. And that takes some doing. Now, one of the things that Jan frequently does is do call and response. Crick! And she does that, and I've completely copied it from her. I've copied it from her. She's got various other calls and responses as well. And so, just before I got on the plane to come to Thailand on Sunday night, I rang her up and I said, Jan, I'm pretty certain I know why you say crick crack, but why do you do it? And she said, well, the reason I do it is to get people's attention again, if they're sort of fading a little bit. She says, the reason that I do it is just to make sure that they haven't gone to sleep. But it was the third thing she said which interested me very much. She said, but it's also, on a more profound level, these weren't exactly her words, but it's also me asking them if they are still prepared to be involved in the contractual relationship that we have. We have a contractual relationship. I have, for my part, agreed to tell you a story. You, this is the people listening to Jan, for your part have agreed to enter into the contract by listening to my story and becoming part of the storytelling instant. Now, if you decide to opt out of the contract, everything falls apart. So if I go, quick, it's like people sort of saying, yes, I'm still prepared to be involved. And I wonder very much whether she isn't onto a really big something about teaching. That some of the time, the job of the teacher is maybe precisely to go quick back and get students to say, yes, we are still in the contract. We're still on task and so on. Now, what I want to do in the time remaining to me is to show you 3 little examples of teaching. And what I want you to tell me, the first thing you're going to tell me in each example is, I'm just going to show of hands, and I'm going to say, do you like it a lot, more or less, or not so much? Yeah? So here are three fairly straightforward examples of what teachers do. The first one comes from a book of mine which will be published in March called Essential Teacher Knowledge, and here's a teacher called Connor.
Okay, I need 5 students, so Yuri, Malika, and Pedro, and Sayed, and want to come up here, stand in a line here, so Sayed just here, and then you can make a line all the way to Pedro, make it move back a little bit. Good, good, good. Okay. I'm going to give you a bit of paper. Don't look at it, okay? Don't look at it. Just hold it up, yeah? Don't look. Hold it up. Okay. Hold it up. Good. Okay. Everybody? Is this correct? Okay, so you need to tell them to move to make a sentence.
Was yesterday.
Yeah. You need to tell them. Tell them. Yes.
No, Malika. You should be first. Follow her. Yeah.
Yes.
And then listen.
Yes. Yesterday is the lesson.
Can somebody read the sentence to check? Can you read the sentence?
Manuela's wedding anniversary was yesterday.
Okay, good. Sounds good. What's the problem? The problem is yesterday because it has a capital letter. Okay, the capital has to go at the beginning of the sentence. Okay, so anybody else? So Sarida is here as well. Okay. Okay, so let's try that again. Can somebody else read the sentence? Bruno, can you read the sentence?
Yesterday was Manuela's wedding anniversary.
Very good. Are we happy with that? Yes? Yes. Excellent. Very good. We need to
Okay, so remember, you've got 3 choices. Like it a lot? More or less? Not so much? Yes, so it's some mixed responses. By the way, you will find a mixed response in a room full of teachers to every single activity that is ever offered. You will never get 10 teachers to agree that something is good. And it's glorious that that happens. If teachers agreed about everything, we wouldn't need TESOL. But we don't. Because the thing about teachers, it came up in I can't back up the reference in your talk, Christine. The thing about being a teacher is we have to be who we are. And we're different, thank God. And as a result, you'll never get everyone to agree about it. Anyway, so that's Connor, and we'll come back to him in a minute. Now, here's a guy called Herman Correa, and he teaches in, you can't see it yet, he teaches in Colombia. And this is a very noisy interview, forgive me, which I did with him at a teachers' conference in Cali, in Colombia. And he's doing a web quest. Do you know what a web quest is? Hands up if you know what a web quest is. Okay, for those of you who didn't put your hands up, it's perfectly simple. It's a quest on the web. And a quest. How surprising. It just means you go searching on the web. It's like we used to do projects before we had the internet. And you would send students to the library to find things out in order to do their project. Well, in this case, with a web quest, you send people on the internet to find things out. It's as simple as that. It's a project. Now, if some teachers prepare web quests very carefully and they tell students which links to go to find the information. Or, depending on your students, you can just say, I'm not going to tell you, go search. But here's Herman Correa doing a web quest, and what he's decided to do, to suggest to his students, is that they're going to have to relocate their business to a different city. Here we go.
Not long ago, I was trying to teach, the unit was called money, okay, so I wanted to, the students to learn vocabulary, money related vocabulary, and I came up with this idea, I created a web quest, so I divided the group, two, and I gave them like one city in the world, so they got to research the city. So I was thinking this was the parameters were, okay, you're moving to another city, relocate, you're very successful executive, okay? So you have to keep your same standard of living, so you have to research how much it will cost for you to move there, and so they have to research utilities, rent, insurance, everything. So they were all of them here on their own, have to go in like supermarkets and create a budget. The idea is to create a budget and tell, okay, how much does it live for this person? Does it take for this person to live in Tokyo or in Paris or New York? And I love it. Thoroughly got into it, and I think I accomplished my objective. I gave them the different items that I have to cover. So you have to cover utilities. So what's utilities? Okay, well, then I have to research them to look up, and they themselves get all the vocabulary that they need. So now they want to talk about public services, which is direct Spanish translation, and they learn different utilities. They learn lots of even professional vocabulary because they have to go into the supermarket and okay, what do you buy? These meat to survive. So they have to go online supermarkets and find out every single item, the cost, and then put into a budget, multiply by etc. Sounds fantastic. Thank you very much.
So there he is. What Herman did is he says that students learned a lot of English because they had to work out what utilities mean. What does utilities mean? What's he talking about? Utilities what? What? Electricity, telephone, water, sewerage, that kind of stuff. So they had to find these things out, and they learnt the language as they found them out. They went searching to find them out. So he reckons that, anyway, like it a lot? More or less? Not so much? Yeah, so the enthusiasm level has dropped a bit. Remember, the question I'll ask you in the last few minutes of this is about focus, attention in the mind. Remember, of course, this sounds very silly, but remember that these people are all language teachers. That's their main role is to help students to learn the language. Here's Bianca Hoffman. Sorry, I'll take it back again. Bianca Hoffman, and she's just describing, this is a very short little clip, she's from Germany, and she describes something that she does with her students. What do you think of this?
I always do some vocab tests so every week, so they know, okay, every Thursday we have vocab test, and I give them 4 pages, and they have a week to prepare the vocab, and then I'm testing it with synonyms, idioms, so sometimes they have to explain the word in English, sometimes they have to give me a synonym or the antonym, so yeah, I do it like that. And they like it because it sort of makes them work, and they get a reward for that. So if they were diligent at home, if they worked hard, so they get a good mark for that, and if not, they know more.
What do you think of that? She gives them, presumably, words they've previously studied. She gives them a list. They've got a week to learn them, and then she gives them a test. Like it a lot? More or less? Not very much? It's quite interesting, this one, because, of course, that describes precisely how people learn in many, many educational cultures, especially